Okay, we've got a critical mass of over 70 participants, which is a really good number. We can make a move, and I'm sure other people will join us as we proceed. Well, my name is Akanimo Odon, and I will be the moderator today. And this what promises to be an interesting webinar is the International Enterprise Webinar of the Participate with RECIRCULATE program. And I think in some sense, when we're trying to put this together, we were thinking about different topics as we're co-developing the idea and theme for the webinar. But I think if I want to put some house rules. So if you're not speaking, could you please mute your microphone? Could you please mute your microphone unless you have to speak? And also a few things we're going to say as we proceed today. I'll give the structure shortly. There will be a series of conversations in the chat section of the Zoom webinar. And so feel free to make comments, feel free to ask questions as we proceed. And working with the different, with our team, we'll try and pick up specific feedback and questions and relate back to everybody. And so we can have a good flowing session today. So back to the introduction. So thinking about the theme for the webinar today, different topics came to our mind. And then I think we finally got to the topic in form of a question, which is, what is the business of research? And I mean, the more I think about it, the more it feels to me like the word business and the word research, especially in an African context, in several cases, doesn't seem to go together. They're kind of two opposite terms, but is that supposed to be the case? Now, in an era where the identification of long-term solutions to sustainable development and climate change challenges across the world is very crucial, it's important to understand the place of research and innovation. And as a matter of fact, it's significant in developing homegrown solutions for Africa and the impact of that across board. Now, everyone here listening to me knows for a fact that there is no arguing that there exists a massive gap between academic research and industry in many African countries, and strategies and policies that drive this knowledge exchange are very important if we're going to have actual sustainable development. As a matter of fact, most researchers know the term publish or perish, a term that is being sung across all board and everyone talks about it. And it's used to describe the fact that research in Africa is mostly driven by a publish that's to be promoted basis, as against in some cases as it's supposed to be a publish for impact basis. And the fact is that both can run concurrently, but it depends on the structure in place and understanding of the fact for this to be tenable. The African Union, I think in their strategy document of 2024, emphasized that African states should allocate up to 1% of their GDP towards financing research and innovation. And up till now, many African economies still struggle with even reaching 0.5% of their GDP. So that means there's a fundamental issue even around funding. And across the board, the issue comes at the fact that ultimately, for us to progress in research and to make an impact, the different bubbles in which different sides of the economy, whether it's academia, industry, government, or communities exist, have to engage, and those gaps need to be bridged fundamentally. That is what we hope to tackle today. And under the premise, can you get a researcher to think entrepreneurially? What is the business of research? Is it required or needed for us to make impact on the continent? On that note, I think the first thing would be to give an introduction, and then I'm going to introduce our first speaker today. And after the first speaker gives an introduction of the project that is funding this specific webinar, then we're going to have two panel sessions. Each panel session would have 4 panelists each, and I'll be introducing them as we progress. And they will deal with 2 different broad areas, which I will also introduce. So it gives an idea of what the structure of today would look like. Thank you very much for joining us. And on that note, I wish to introduce the very first speaker who will give an introduction to the day. And it's none other than our Professor Kirk Semple. Now, Kirk is a professor of environmental microbiology with over 30 years of experience in research. His main fields of interest is in organic contaminants and biota interactions in soils. And recently he's moved to studying bioenergy and the use of microorganisms for energy generation and the application of those byproducts for soil amendments. He wears many hats. He's a multi-awardee with funding from different international bodies. And currently is Director of the International Engagement for Lancaster Environment Center, Associate Dean for International Faculty of Science and Technology. He's also the Interim Director of the Future Cities Research Institute. And as a matter of fact, his hat on this webinar is as Director of RECIRCULATE and the Actuate projects, which in the next 10 minutes, he'll be telling us about. Can we welcome Kirk, please? Kirk, over to you.
Well, thank you, Akan. Let me just share my. Can you see that, Akan?
Yes, you can.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I know that it's afternoon in with some people on this call. And as Akan said, I'm going to introduce the project. I know that some people are already familiar with this, so I do apologise, but it's important for those that are new to this that they understand where we're coming from. So I'm going to introduce the project, and really before I talk about the project particularly, I'm going to just talk a little bit about where this project comes from. It really comes from UK government funding under the Global Challenges Research Fund, and the project itself, RECIRCULATE, is funded to the tune of £7 million and includes colleagues from obviously from the UK at Lancaster University, but also from colleagues and partners in Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria, but also Kenya, Malawi, Zambia, and Botswana. Many of these people are on the call, which is fantastic. So RECIRCULATE is an acronym, which is a lot easier to say than Driving Eco-Innovation in Africa, Capacity Building for a Safe Circular Water Economy. And really the project is a shared vision, and it's something that we're very proud of. It's where we've actually worked together to develop this project, to look at how we can support new partnerships and approaches supporting that to enable African researchers to grow transformational impact through working with and for the communities. And it's not just working within the research community, it also involves people from other walks of life, including the private sector, policy sector, NGOs, and so on. And of course, it's very important to note that it is truly multidisciplinary as well. And as I've already sort of alluded to, we are working internationally as well. But the key thing for me and many of my colleagues that this is a genuine partnership. So to summarize, really, the project is broken down into different work packages. So on this slide, you can see water for sanitation, which feeds into water for energy, which then feeds into water for food, and then feeds back to water for sanitation. And really, this describes a virtuous cycle, or what we are now calling it, a circular economy, where we're actually, adding value to wastes which we'd normally throw away, to produce energy in a sustainable way, either as gas through biogas and methane, or conversion of that to electricity, which can be used for heating and cooling and light, obviously. And then the waste products from the bioenergy processes to support agriculture and food production. And of course, agriculture produces its own waste, as does food production, which can then feed back into the loop, thereby completing the virtuous cycle. And really, why, in terms of today, this is really very, very important in terms of, the longevity and the development of the science and technology that underpins this project. And really, the thing that keeps me awake at night is how we can sustain the activities within the project beyond its funding, and how we can engage with, people outside of the research envelope, if you like, the so-called business community to drive this forward. And that's where, you know, this discussion is so important, particularly with people from the business community, but also people who are experts in entrepreneurial thinking and innovative research to help develop these systems that can actually be genuinely used within communities, in not only in Africa, but also in the UK as well. And sitting side by side with this is the notion of engagement and knowledge exchange, which is actually absolutely crucial for taking forward the entire entity that is RECIRCULATE and similar projects forward, and you know, offering impact or developing impact, and of course offering the legacy as well. Now, one of the things that's absolutely crucial to this, the development of this, is actually being able to show people that the technology and what we're doing within RECIRCULATE is actually viable. So we've actually, from the RECIRCULATE project, we've gained additional funding to build 2 demonstrators in Ghana and Nigeria, through which we can not only educate students and school pupils, but also communities in this area, and hopefully from that look to develop entrepreneurial opportunities which can be embedded within communities. So really, to sum up, really, it's over to the dream team here, which you can see in your screen, and you'll be hearing from and engaging over the next hour and a half or so, to offer up their perspectives around these elements of RECIRCULATE, particularly how we can take research and, you know, engage with business going forward. And really, I'm going to shut up now and let the people who really know what they're talking about continue in this webinar. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the webinar today. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Kirk. That's fantastic. A good introduction, and I think gives an overview of what the project is about. RECIRCULATE as a project, and also Actuate, is based on the premise of capacity building. Even though it's impinged on the circular water economy, but ultimately it's about developing capacities for transformational change in African context. And today, I'm going to delve into the panel sessions. I'm going to begin with the first panel. And Kirk is very correct. We do have a dream team. That's not even messing around. We actually have an incredible team. So for the first panel, the theme for the first panel session is around engaging businesses, policymakers, and also communities. So as an academic, as a researcher, whatever it is you do, how can you walk outside your bubble? How can you engage with businesses? How can you engage with policymakers and communities? These folks are absolutely crucial, and they form the best partners that shows a great pathway for the impact of your work. But how can you engage them? And so on this panel we have four individuals who I'll introduce shortly. And so the first person on the panel is Dr. Ruth Alcock. Ruth is currently the head of enterprise and business and partnerships at the Lancaster Environment Center of Lancaster University. She leads an incredible team of staff towards creating impacts from research and partnerships with businesses and other science and technology users. She has taken the lead role in coordinating activities within and between the science and user communities, identifying new collaborative research opportunities and optimizing these towards professional development. Believe it or not, Ruth trained as an environmental chemist, a PhD from Lancaster University. And she's developed distinctive international profile in research that targeted at human health implications of chemical exposure. But in recent times, she's focused fundamentally around knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer, which we'll be speaking about shortly. On this panel also, we have the incredible Edna Kabbalah-Litana. Now, Edna is a member of the African Growth and Development Policy Modeling Consortium. At present, she's a senior lecturer and director of entrepreneurship and student engagement at Copperbelt University in Zambia. In her position, she lectures and she performs research. She holds an MA in economics from the University of Zambia, and she specializes in agricultural markets and prices. Edna today will give us some insight with respect to student engagement and how she's been able to take those models for incredible impact at the University of Zambia. Welcome, Edna. Also on the panel is Dr. Andy Wickard, who is the manager of a Center for Global Eco Innovation at Lancaster University. Now, Andy manages the center that unites expertise, resources, and global contacts of Lancaster University, University of Liverpool, and Inventia Limited to develop new eco-innovative products and services towards collaboration in the northwest of England. Andy has worked extensively in business development roles, spreading across different areas for the business growth at the Department for Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, and currently he does incredible work with navigating research and industry. And Andy will give us some great insights with respect to the idea of co-development, co-location, and how to work with communities. Welcome, Andy. And finally, we have on the first panel, Mr. Samuel Kanati. Now, Samuel is an administrator at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR in Ghana. He's a knowledge exchange expert and engagement trainer on the RECIRCULATE Global Challenges Research Fund project. He's a media communication expert with a master's degree in public administration from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. And today, Samuel will give us some insights with respect to the communication role as regards to engagement of academia and business. Welcome, panelists. Now, I think I'm going to start the panel session with throwing a few questions around, if I may. And I think, Ruth, maybe I'll start with you, if you don't mind.
That's great, I can think.
Beautiful. So looking at your profile is quite interesting. So I noticed that you actually did your PhD in Lancaster. But in recent times, you've worked substantially around knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange. And I'm kind of struggling in my mind, how was that move? Now, why is that important? And in your mind, I know you manage a team that kind of helps with knowledge transfer of research and other communities, businesses or policymakers. Like, my question to you really is it important to have a team of that nature to bridge these gaps? And what is their role and how can it be set up?
Okay, thanks, Akan, and good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people on the call and some familiar names and familiar faces. It's really great. Do you want to start with the transition to knowledge exchange, first of all, because that's quite interesting. So as Akan mentioned, I was a researcher for many years. I'm an environmental chemist by training, and I worked on models of chemical exposure to humans. So I developed models of lifetime exposures to various persistent organic chemicals for a long time. And many people will still recognize that that's what I was quite good at. I guess my research career came to a bit of a stall when there was no jobs in the academic world. And so I was forced to have a think and a look around and see what else was available. And I guess I sort of fell into knowledge exchange. It wasn't particularly planned as such. I think most people's roles in life, they're not always very well planned. And I kind of fell into a role in which I was managing a network of stakeholders. And it was really interesting and I was pretty good at it. And I think that's where I started, really. And about that time, the whole area of knowledge exchange and a professional role for those sorts of people was emerging. So I was around at the right time to sort of get involved in that. And I worked at Lancaster in the Environment Centre, and I now lead the partnerships and engagement team within that group. And it's really important, I guess, that that's a dedicated team of people that are responsible for all sorts of knowledge exchange activities across the department and wider university. And they really are critical, because I would say that, I guess, because that's my role, but they act as that bridge between the academic world and end users. And they take that research and make a difference with it. And I guess for me, that's what's really interesting and exciting. It's about, every day is different. We get engaged in all sorts of different projects and all sorts of different people. And at the end of the day, it's about relationship building, it's about partnership working, and really, yeah, making a difference in the world.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So it feels to me that that role is absolutely crucial. I think I guess I know the participants in the room are from different organizations. I think the question is, are there dedicated teams in your organization that helps and facilitates that connection between research and the end users, whether they be business, communities, or government, as the case may be? Thank you very much, Ruth. And I'll come back to you shortly, but I think I'll just move to the next question. So I think, Sam, if I may ask you quickly, so I know you work as an administrator at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research at Ghana. And my question is this. At my introduction, I gave a sense of the fact that, generally speaking, in Africa especially, the output of research is fundamentally around publication of papers. I guess my question is this. Why do researchers depend only on publication of papers as a way of communicating their work or their results? And is that sustainable in our current state? Sam, please.
All right, thank you. Good morning to everyone. So like Akan introduced me earlier, I've participated in knowledge exchange trainings with Lancaster University, and I've also been a trainer on knowledge exchange activities. Now, as researchers communicate, there's no a yes answer, because I've sampled the views of a number of researchers informally. And then, although they mentioned that yes, publication is one of the first modes of communication, it is not the only way that they communicate their research. Now, the publication they do largely is dependent on the phrase that it's in the research space that you publish or perish. And so they would want to do publications for promotion purposes, and also to show documentary evidence that they've done this work or the other, because it's tied to promotion. Some views are that some researchers also do this for recognition, and then they take pride in the number of publications that they have had. That makes them very relevant in their field of study. And so you would have other researchers saying that I would want to do a publication in the journal so that my work can be tested for originality through a peer review. And that's what the popular opinion in academia is. Peer-reviewed papers gives some level of credibility. However, there are other forms with which researchers engage through workshops, seminars, conferences, the use of social media platforms for engagement, but they would largely want to focus on publications first because it gives them some kind of inherent benefits than the other forms of communication methods, right?
Thanks, Sam. So I'm going to come back to you in a minute. So I think my struggle, and I think I speak for a few other individuals, is the fact that communicating through publication of papers or through webinars and seminars, I think in some sense, your target audience or the target audience of these African researchers seems to be fellow researchers like themselves. I think that's actually where the bone of contention is. And so I'll come back to you with the follow-up questions afterwards to kind of give a sense of which other ways can they communicate their outputs or their findings or their knowledge to non-researchers. I think for me, that is actually the critical point if they are to engage other folks that are not researchers. But I want to move to the next question, and I want to kind of target Andy with this. Andy, so you manage an incredible center, the Center for Global Eco-Innovation at Lancaster University. And I remember, just going back to what Ruth said, I'm proud to call myself a knowledge exchange expert. I couldn't call myself this as I was finishing my PhD at Lancaster some years ago now. But now I do. And as I discovered, it feels like it's a niche area that is absolutely crucial if African research is to engage with industry. Now, one of the first things that kind of took me by surprise when I go to Lancaster was the fact that in the Lancaster Environment Center itself, okay, and the Center for Global Eco Innovation. There's the residents of different small, medium-sized enterprises resident in the university. I found it quite interesting. Now, that model is called co-location. So Andy, do you mind expanding on this model of co-location, maybe even throwing light on the idea of co-development and expand on why it works from your view? Andy, please.
Thank you, and delighted to be able to speak to everybody. I think one of the things I'd say about co-location is that it's actually just a mechanism for that bigger picture. Part of our bigger picture, and you saw it on Kirk's first slide, is talking about the art of collaboration. And part of that art of collaboration is actually co-design of projects with people, with the external partners that you want to work with, whether that's businesses or policymakers, as well as the university and the researchers and the people actually undertaking the work. So for me, co-location is just part of that. And the reason that it works for us is it's one of the ways that you can start to build some trust and some understanding. In terms of our co-location facilities, we try to make sure that it's a shared space working alongside our researchers. It's not a separate space. We try to make sure that people interface with our researchers and with our academics. But that can be done also in other ways. You know, some people will also do that through workshops, and our team in the management school have a fantastic setup and structure for co-working with businesses by setting up certain residential opportunities through workshops, just to build that trust and that understanding. The second thing I would say about it being a mechanism is that there has to be mutual benefit for people. In terms of how you design these projects. And the benefit is not always quite the same. You know, for the researcher, it may be that you're getting a paper that's peer group reviewed, but for the business, they maybe need to get a new product or a new service out of it. And for the person actually undertaking the work, we engage quite a lot with students and PhD researchers, and my own PhD was done in collaboration with a company. You know, they're actually getting a degree out of it. So there are benefits that each party has to be able to get out of this collaboration. They're not always quite the same, and sometimes that's part of the tension of managing the process. But you have to co-design it in such a way that everybody agrees right at the start that they're going to get some benefit from this co-working. And you do that through that co-design and that shared space. So in terms of the co-location facility itself, opportunities there should be looking at things like shared space, opportunities to meet, not segregating people. It's not about revenue generation for the university. It's about actually having an attractive, sometimes a relatively cheap offer for people to co-locate with you, so that you've got your view on that wider picture of actually how do we then start to work together on projects that ultimately are about making a difference in the world. We see, you know, publish or perish is very interesting, but if all that happens with your publication is it sits on a dusty shelf for the next 30 years, we're not changing the world. If we can actually publish in a way that actually is in collaboration with our businesses and actually starts to make a change in the world, it's in terms of new products that improve the environment or new policies that are coming through government, then actually hopefully we can deliver something that's got some real value, and that starts to get measured certainly in the UK and increasingly I know in other places as research with impact, and that ultimately helps everybody both in terms of reputation and generating future revenue.
Thank you very much, and that's fantastic. I think just listening to you, it almost feels to me like those walls have to be broken down. I used to call a term I've termed the high gate agenda or the high gate phenomenon. And it's based on my traveling around different African countries and the fact that most universities that I've gone to in Africa have one thing in common, and it's the height of their gate. I mean, the entrance gate. They are monstrous. It's almost like creating a physical barrier that translates into a philosophical disconnect. I think for me, the idea of bridging those gaps and locating people close to each other and having those communications is fundamental for things to work. Now, I want to move to a different part of this engagement. I hear many universities, many researchers talk about the fact that there is very limited resources. But in my mind, it feels like a resource most universities have is their students. In Copperbelt University, there are over 20,000 students. In University of Benin, there are over 40,000 students. That's a lot of students. So now I want to kind of address Edna, if I may. Edna, so something most universities have in common in abundance is their students. From your experience, respect to engagement, how can a university or an organization use their students or work with their students towards increasing their partnerships? Could you highlight this, please, Edna?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Akan. Thank you for having me here. What I believe is that, you know, for our university here, we've identified, and I believe many other universities could do the same, is to identify the strategic partners in developing the innovation economy. That is, there are several of them, and for us, we have identified government entities, corporations, venture investors, and even our entrepreneurs, those that could be classified within the medium, small, or large entrepreneurship classifications. So these ones always work well to partner with the university, but because the university has got ideas, and the ideas lie with the wealth of students. You know, the students are never short of creative ideas, they're never short of ways to drive those ideas to fruition so that they can be able to develop a particular entity or particular partnerships. So when we link our universities to these students, when we link our universities to these partners and have the students as major stakeholders in terms of driving these particular activities within this linkage, then the universities definitely impact on the strategic partnerships and actually the economy at large, or the innovation economy. And then what we see here is that with students, they want to enhance their employability skills. So on the one hand, students gain in terms of increasing or enhancing their employability skills. And then on the other hand, the universities also enhance their profiles in terms of creating impact or strategic partnerships that create impact, and not just the ones that are just written on or talked about for sure. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I think that's very clear. So kind of understand that students are not just students, they are more than that. They're actually partners and stakeholders in this innovation economy, and actually working with them and using their creativity and innovation to engage with partners becomes absolutely crucial. Ruth, I'm going to come back to you because your career is very fascinating to me. I guess, and just maybe people hearing would wonder, if knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer is quite niche, is there some kind of a career route or a pathway towards becoming a knowledge exchange expert, a knowledge exchange professional like you have been? What are the key things one should consider, and how does one get into it?
I suppose there's multiple pathways.
Okay.
Traditionally, it's in the UK, it can be people that have a research career that then want to transfer into knowledge exchange. Okay. But increasingly what we see are individuals from industry as well, moving into a knowledge exchange career, working for a research organization. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's an ideal sort of combination, if you like. I mean, I suppose what's needed initially are research organizations actually committing resources to these types of roles.
Okay, individual.
Or even part roles, and that will actually get that process going.
That seems to me like even currently, even though you're a researcher, you can actually create, if you like, a side career strategy or an expansion for yourself, which is thinking about how to be a knowledge exchange expert. Because then that helps you both for your own research, but also others and your institution on how you can increase the connection between research and communities. Would that be right then?
I think so. And I think it's for people that are interested in that sort of relationship, partnership working. I think, you know, for many academics, actually, a key part of their role today is a knowledge exchange aspect of their career. And that will actually, if they're really committed to that and interested in co-designing new research with a whole range of end users, then those sorts of skills come forward.
Thank you very much. So everyone listening to me, please, as you're listening to the views and insights, please just write or text your questions or views on the chat section, and I'll pick it up and kind of address it to which of the panelists should respond to it. Now, Sam, coming back to you now, you know, in your earlier answer, you almost made it very clear that there are many ways researchers communicate their findings as a way of engagement, either through workshops, papers, and so on. Now, and I was thinking about this from a different point of view. Now, if I'm a researcher and I write an incredible research paper, it's less likely a busy executive in business would read it and maybe understand or engage with it. So my question is this: what other ways and methods can researchers communicate their research or their outputs to especially non-researchers? Because they have to be engaged for things to happen. Sam, please.
Right, okay, thank you. So it's important that you would want to consider your audience mapping.
Okay.
Right, so your audience mapping, it's important, so that if you want to do, or you're doing scientific publications, the target audience is academia, people in typical research.
That's correct.
Now, how about grassroots? You would want to do things like charts or illustrations or documentary drama, and engage them so that they are part of whatever communication the researcher is putting across, so that they sort of own it. Now, you're talking of that busy executive who wouldn't get that time to read that long stuff. Now, that is why we have stuff like policy briefs for decision makers. And so you would want to use that mode in communicating to decision makers. And for technical people, reports are very fine. Now, you would realize that we live in, now it's more of an audio-visual world where people like to look at photos and audios. Yes, now, and so you would want to employ the social media means of communication, because then it has a very big audience reach. Now, when you take Facebook, for instance, they have about 1.6 billion active users. Look at this space that you would want to send your medium through, unlike, let's say, ResearchGate, which has quite a number of people, but not up to the size of Facebook. Now, you would want to consider ResearchGate as Facebook for all scientists, because that is what they are comfortable in. So there are various forms that, you would want to employ and then put your message across. Right.
It almost feels to me, I don't know, maybe people listening to me, if you're a policy maker, you're in government, or you are the head of a research organization, it almost feels to me, and don't quote me on this, I'm only giving a view. It almost feels to me like every research organization, in terms of, if you like, the output, you should almost mandate, really, that every researcher publishing a paper, alongside the paper should be maybe a blog or a little one-page policy brief for potential engagement with policymakers, or a small, I don't know, business brief of some sort alongside the paper. Because then you begin to get researchers to kind of use their skills a bit differently and act in respect to communicating their outputs and their knowledge to other stakeholders. I mean, imagine that was a compulsory requirement by government for promotion. That could be incredible. Anyway, that's for a different day. So I want to go to Edna. Edna, so you were talking about, I can imagine some people are saying, don't I have enough work on my hands? You now want me to write policy briefs and blogs. But I'm saying, I want to bring up a discussion for today. So Edna, now I'm thinking, for those students, in my mind, based on your views, they are necessary for engagement. But what efforts should be taken to make them more enterprising, both researchers and students?
There's a lot that we can do with partnerships, with networking, and the power of networks, and also changes in curriculum. But for me, what I believe should stand out much more is inculcating mindset change and embracing entrepreneurship for sustainable development. It has to create impact for us to be able to transform, the globe, to transform our economies and the like. So what I feel is that entrepreneurship should be embedded in the curriculum for most students, and even for researchers. Like, they have to look at, looking at topics or researching themes that relate to entrepreneurship that solves much of our social and economic problems, and also still brings an income. And what I also believe is what we're doing here at CBU is that for every person or every student student that is studying in whatever program, we have embedded entrepreneurship in that regard in the curriculum. So every student here qualifies knowing that they have an academic paper that has some entrepreneurship course to it. Besides that, I feel that there should be much more collaboration between students and researchers, as well as industry and civil society, in ensuring that they solve these economic and social problems, but in an entrepreneurial manner. Okay. I also feel that, you know, there should be capacity building that is encouraged. Like, I mean, I am a recipient of RECIRCULATE innovation training, and I think differently, and I can do things differently. So if it is extended to researchers and students alike, that capacity building trainings and skills development programs should be for them, then that would be also helping. But I also believe much more that efforts to encourage, you know, networking much more between researchers across, you know, different countries, across different sections of the globe, would also help in making sure that researchers and students are more enterprising and much more impactful. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So that's very powerful. Just talking about capacity building. So Ruth asked an open question on the chat section that would anybody listening to this session be interested in a knowledge exchange training? So please, just for us to get a sense of numbers as we continue this, just write "I'm interested" and your email address on the chat section, so we have a sense of numbers if we're to put a training of that nature together. So as we proceed. Now, Andy, to a last question. So you were speaking about this connection between academia and business, and you also explained the idea of co-location and co-creation. Now, for me, I've worked in research and I've worked with business, and it's almost like two different worlds. They almost don't think alike. While academia thinks about knowledge, business thinks about money, maybe government talks about power. So I guess my question is, what are the key challenges to setting up a co-location or a co-development initiative or program? And how have you mitigated these challenges in your experience? Andy, please.
I think, first of all, you need to explain the strengths and different places that everybody comes from. Okay. But the first key point for everyone to understand is, certainly in the UK, 1/3 of our economic growth comes from research and development. But actually, many companies don't have a huge amount of resource in terms of research and development. And that knowledge and that capacity is actually offered in the universities. So we've got mutual benefit in working together. And that's the first thing that you need to understand and communicate. Okay. As a university, one of the key ways that we mitigate the way of bringing these things together is actually also to be challenge-led, not technology-driven. Oh, so we always start from that point. What is the business, or what is the policymaker, what is the organization seeking to do? It's not for us about having a particular technology that we want to push out into the marketplace and sell to the world. That's spin out. And you know, that works in certain cases for universities, but actually, on the whole, we're not terribly good at it. We're not terribly good at making money out of spin out things. We're in the knowledge of teaching people and research and education. Okay. What we do is spin in. We ask them what challenges do they need to address, and then we link that to the understanding that there already is in the university, and then go on to research that. That's a slightly different approach, and that also means you also have to deal with the challenges about who deals with the IP that comes out of that at the end. And actually, in many cases, what you want to do as a university is give it away, because it's the business that actually might ultimately be able to benefit from it. And third thing with regard to mitigation is, actually, with the best will in the world, universities are not that flexible. You know, we kind of have our academic calendar, and we have our modules, and we have our courses and other such things. And they don't always map too well to the things that the business wants. So actually what we found we have to design is a program which is actually really flexible, so that we're able to take businesses where they are. Some people need a short-term research project. That might just be a very short-term interaction with an undergraduate. Some people need a really long-term, in-depth study of where they might go within 5 to 10 years, and that could well be it's a PhD program. But in terms of what it brings, we find also that one of the other things you have to mitigate and understand is actually get buy-in from the academics. And initially that can be a little bit challenging, because it's asking them to look outside the box. It's not always their core area of research that you're looking at. But actually, once you start working with a few academics and bring some projects in,
Yes.
they get quite excited about them. And suddenly that opens up new areas of thinking and opportunity for them. And actually, once you start that program, it just rolls and starts to escalate.
Yeah.
And we find that progressively more and more people suddenly start to come to you from within your research institute rather than you having to be banging on their door.
So basically, it feels to me like in many instances, researchers put together a proposal, their incredible high tower idea, and they've done everything, and then they now engage industry. But you are saying that actually it should be demand driven, problem driven, where you are asking the partners, asking the end users first, what problem do you have? And so your crafting and design of a project or proposal is respect to addressing the problem that has already been identified. And I think for me, that's a different way of looking at things.
It is, and we've absolutely seen in the UK how there's been a transformation in thinking, because the UK government used to talk about funding 8 great challenges of research, 8 great technologies. Now they're starting to talk about the Global Challenge Research Fund. So we've got that understanding from policymakers that actually being challenge-led is potentially going to give you better solutions than actually just saying, I've got a particular technology I want to focus on. So
Ruth, you might be surprised to know, I just did a very quick count, and you were asked a question, sorry to put you on the spot, but you asked a question that will people be interested in a knowledge exchange training? And just counting, over 70 people have said they're interested. So I guess I'm putting you on the spot now. So would that be, is there a possibility or feasibility for this training to be delivered, Ruth?
I think there is. I mean, I was just provoking people's interest. I mean, before we start investing in these sorts of activities, it's really good to know that there's an appetite for this kind of training. So I think, you know, now we've got a group of people that might be interested, we can go to them and just try and co-design something that will work for everybody.
Oh, there's an appetite, all right. 80 people sounds like a beautiful class for even a simple pilot. Now, so there are a few questions that's come out on the chat section, which I want to address to all the panelists, and anybody can respond. So I think it's a very interesting question. So someone asked Sam, maybe Sam or anybody can respond. So now he's talking about communication of research using social media. Somebody asked, so how do you measure the impact of that communication? And anybody on the panel can respond to that. How do you measure the impact if there is a communication on, say, Facebook or social media as a way to engage people?
I guess I can. It's all about tracking. So, you know, a lot of this is all about measuring and quantifying what's happened and where that information goes.
Okay.
So I know for a lot of our social media work, you know, you look at, it's not just numbers, it's geography and who's actually talking about what you're presenting.
Okay, so for example, say number of likes, numbers of pokes, and maybe numbers of commentary. And I think interestingly, if you craft the block right, and there is an action point at the end of the block, that's kind of a lot of action, and you can actually measure responses to that action point at the end of that block. Thank you very much. So now, are there any questions? So we have 1 more minute. Okay, so any other questions? Just going through the list quickly. So I guess that will be a wrap up of the panel session. But what I want to do is this, is to open up to everybody for a very short engagement. And engagement is, we're going to have a quick Mentimeter session, so only 3 minutes. And it's a very simple question. The idea is, if you all look at the chat section right now, there should be a link has been posted, a simple link on the chat session. So what I want you to do is just click on that link, and the question that you respond to is, in your view, having listened to the panelists, what do you think would enable better engagement, since we've understood that engagement is absolutely crucial? So maybe in one word or one phrase, click on the link and just write a word or a phrase, in your view, what you think would encourage or increase better engagement of academia and industry. Let's go. Let's see what words comes out. Okay, better communication, that's fantastic. A lot more opportunities for connection. So there has to be actual opportunity for the engagement to happen. Oh, I like that one. There's somebody listening to Ruth. More KE professionals. That's absolutely cool. So the idea of folks co-designing, so give opportunities for co-designing, better publicity of need. So it seems like not very many people know about those gaps. And so needs identification, similar values and goals, because they all work in different bubbles. They have different value systems and different benefits. And so if you can articulate what is similar to them, then it's better engagement. What do we have here? Awareness. That's actually very interesting. Many people don't know or are not fully aware of how important it is for the engagement to happen. Now there's trust. Oh, guess what? That's absolutely crucial. If I don't like you or trust you, you can speak all the grammar in this world, I will not engage with you. So how do you build that trust between yourself and partners? And I'm sure it's not automatic. It's on the basis of working together and developing the trust. So more openness, being open to each other. And that's very important because businesses can be secretive in the ideas or IP. Well, it's just quiet information. I don't want to know. So openness, volunteering as a team, meeting needs. There's someone talk about more interaction. There's integrity of the process. So I think there's fantastic engagement going on here. This is really, really good. So nobody's talking about funding. Oh yes, there's more funding. I can just say that now because I think for me, funding is important to actually drive the process. If you're going to employ a new KE professional, I think in some sense, you need to be able to provide some kind of remuneration. That's good. So we have core delivery opportunities, just simple language. The fact that business folks talk in simple monetary terms in most cases, but scientists and academics talk in knowledge and if you like, theoretical concepts. And so having similar language is absolutely crucial to a better engagement. Thank you very, very much. Community participation. So I think if there's any other question before we wrap up the first panel, then we can move to the second panel. So now what I want to do is I like us to appreciate all the speakers or the first panelists. So everybody unmute yourself and let's give them a clap. Let's go. I want to hear the clap sound. Let's. I'm not hearing anybody. Unmute yourself. Fantastic. So I think that's the end of the first panel session. Thanks for the participation. Okay. So we're going to move straight ahead to the second panel session. And the purpose of the second panel is to kind of narrow things down a bit more. So we've understood engagement and ways of engagement, the issues around engagement, problems, and ways of mitigating those issues. Now, the second panel is going to talk about making entrepreneurship happen. So forget about all the theory. How do you make entrepreneurship happen? What do you have to do? And on the second panel are 4 incredible individuals who are fantastic in the field. And I will give a quick profile of the 4 of them. On the second panel, we have Professor Sarah Jack. Now, Sarah Jack is the professor of entrepreneurship at Lancaster University. Her research areas involves the use of qualitative methods to consider social aspects of entrepreneurship. Her work has been published widely in international and national journals. She has received several awards and grants from different funding bodies, including Knowledge Transfer Partnership Body, Northfield Foundation, Cambridge Kennedy Trust, EPSRC, and today we look forward to hearing our insights on social entrepreneurship. On the second panel, it's on the second person on the second panel is a good friend of mine, Mr. Yame Nkogwe. Now, Yame is a sustainable cities strategy specialist. He's a founder and owner of Sustainable Cities Africa, an international center for excellence that provides smart cities, best practice, and knowledge in an African context. Now, Yame is the country representative for the African Circular Economy Network, and is also a member of the Green Building Council of Botswana. He's a proponent of innovation principles, a good friend of mine, and his role in African youth development for transformational change. And Yame today will speak about innovation and partnerships. Welcome on board, Yame. And also on the panel is Dr. Joanne Larty. Now, Joanne is the Director of Teaching for the Lancaster University Management School, as well as Director of Undergraduate Studies. Now, our current research activities are focused on a role that includes people, communities, and the physical environment in the whole entrepreneurial process. Now, she's a Chartered Institute of Marketing qualified marketing professional. I didn't know that, Joanne, until today. And currently she leads on the entrepreneurship and innovation work package of the RECIRCULATE project. Today, Joanne will share some more light on entrepreneurial thinking. Welcome on board, Joanne. And finally, we have also a good friend of mine, Dr. Inam. Now, Edu is an associate professor of analytical chemistry at the University of Uyo in Nigeria, after graduating with a PhD in chemistry from Loughborough University in the UK, and also a postdoctorate degree from Guangzhou Institute of Science and Technology. And on top of that, a postgraduate diploma from United Nations University. Now Edu is a current founder and director of the International Center for Energy and Environmental Sustainability Research at the University of Uyo. And believe it or not, this woman set up a full center from scratch, and she will share some insights with respect to funding and engagement principles. Welcome on board, Edu. Thank you very much, panelists. So I'll kick the second panel session off with a quick question to Joanne, if I may. So Joanne, now we've spoken a lot about researchers and this gap between research and business. I guess my question to you is this: why is entrepreneurial thinking important for researchers? What is your view?
Okay, thank you, Akin. And I think that's a really important question to ask. And thinking about how, I think what we need to do is step back and think about what do we actually mean by entrepreneurial thinking. And I think this builds on what Edna has already said earlier this morning. So what do we mean by entrepreneurial thinking? But what do we mean by entrepreneurship? And I think often entrepreneurship is seen as synonymous with starting a business. And I think we need to kind of move away from that. It does include that, but there's a long-standing and growing argument that entrepreneurship is much more than that. So let's consider entrepreneurship more broadly as working towards making a positive change to the world. So whether that is for profit, whether that's for social, it doesn't matter, but it's about making a positive change to the world. So when we think about key aspects of being entrepreneurial, we talk about being able to identify and understand opportunities to contribute to key problems and challenges in the world. And importantly, we're not trying to solve everything, but identifying areas where we as researchers can make a difference and thinking about our own skills, experience, and knowledge that we can contribute to that. It's also about thinking and acting creatively and innovatively, how we might be able to gather resources. So we can't just use ourselves, and this builds on what other people have said this morning. It's about working with others and really thinking about resources across your partners, across the relationships that you have. And then finally, I would say it's about being resourceful as well. So looking at the resources that we have to hand, because we don't always or ever have all the resources we would like, but we need to be innovative in how we use the resources that we have to hand. So we think about entrepreneurial thinking as making a positive change and doing through those actions. So why is entrepreneurial thinking important for researchers? So as Akin and Sam have mentioned, as researchers, we're in a really privileged and powerful position to make a positive change through both our research and our teaching. I think we always need to remember that we are in such a powerful position. And we often do get caught up in this research and publishing game, publish or perish. It often leads to good research, but within our own fields. And it can even lead to publishing for the sake of publishing, as we talk about. So maybe what we need to do to be more entrepreneurial is to take a step back and to rethink about what we want to do and what we want to achieve as researchers and where we want to make difference within the world. So continually looking for opportunities to make a difference. So being mindful and being aware of different opportunities where we can contribute. And maybe also, and I think this is important, building on what Edna talked about, is stepping outside and working with other people. So stepping outside the fields, our kind of comfort zones. So thinking about the resources through the partnership. So working with academics from other disciplines. You look at RECIRCULATE and what Kirk talked about. It brings together natural scientists, social scientists, and many different fields. It's working with other partner academic institutions as well from around the world. So knowledge sharing, knowledge exchange, and being creative. Creativity and innovation come about through diverse knowledge and through sharing that diverse knowledge. Working with communities and community leaders is also important. You know, we need to be, in order to understand the problems and identify opportunities, we need to be working with communities and with the people on the ground to understand that. And that could be working with NGOs. And importantly, also in working with business and industry, has already been talked about here, and understand their challenges and working with them on making positive change.
Fantastic. Now you've covered in just 3 minutes. That's like that's so cool. You've covered so many things around the entrepreneurial thinking. The idea around beginning from the problem point of view, understanding your power. I think from that's very powerful. That as a researcher, you've got power for change. I almost can think about myself, if you like, in a nice Superman cape, that with me, I can make it happen. And indeed we can, because your research and your investigation has a huge potential to transform lives and communities and make practical change in society. That's very, very way of viewing entrepreneurship from a point of a researcher. So I want to move now to Yame. Now, Yame works in innovation. I think for me, innovation is fantastic, and if you like, creates an environment for creativity, for impact. I guess my question to Yame really is this. Now, I know you're working as an NGO, but you also work in business. So the question is, how do you leverage partnerships with research to grow entrepreneurship for sustainability? Yame, please.
Maybe, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to share perspectives. I wouldn't say I work in an NGO. What I am doing actually is working with a company that is effectively has a mission-driven focus. So because we're working to promote sustainable cities, best practice here in Africa, but starting here in Botswana, effectively what I found to be most effective really is looking at maintaining a focus on the systemic challenges. So what I mean by systemic challenges is that you're looking at the whole view of exactly where the different partners can actually play a role in actually addressing the issue of sustainability, especially in our communities and in our cities. So it's important specifically in addressing that. And to answer your question more deliberately, when we look at where we want to go, we should really be focused on exactly where we are right now. And I think fortunately for that, we have, well, it's not fortunate, but we have just experienced a very traumatic experience that we've all felt at an individual, but also at a collective level. And as you are aware, that's the health pandemic, the COVID-19 health pandemic. What COVID-19 has very clearly laid out is the systemic challenges that we face, but also more importantly, that it was actually about people. So two things there, which is systemic challenges and also it's about people. And so really what we need to understand is that if we're going to move forward, I think a lot of the other speakers have already touched on this fact, is that you need to look at this issue of addressing challenges that we're facing or taking up new opportunities, but looking at the whole view. The whole view specifically of exactly where each of us have a role to play and what our contribution can be. I think somebody talked about mutual benefit and being very explicit from the onset there. So when you're looking at answering exactly your question about how do you leverage strategic partnerships, you need, there's this phrase I love so much. It says hashtag stay in my lane. Basically what that is saying is that you actually have to focus on what your core strength is. And you have to look at what you're trying to do. Nowadays, it's also about looking at what you're trying to do, but looking at from different lenses. For example, if I'm talking to issues of sustainable cities, cities specifically are an amalgamation or an aggregation of different sectors. So, for example, we're talking now about renewable energy, we're talking about circular economy, we're talking about green efficient buildings, we're talking about cybersecurity, there's issues around mobility. So all these things, if you're not careful, can actually start to now take you away from your core focus and what your core strength can be. So what I've really tried to do for a large part is actually concentrate on what I do, which is how do you build an integrated holistic framework that will actually take everybody on this journey as to see what their roles can be. And more increasingly, it's very important to understand what is that focus that you have to keep maintaining on people. And when you do that, what it's actually doing is it's enabling I think somebody talked about the value creation that can actually come about, and where everyone sees where their value can actually come about. So when everyone can see what the value is, both to themselves, but also to the whole,
yeah,
what they're able to do then is to actually give a more meaningful contribution, because they know there's something in for them, but they are contributing to a way forward. So I think before I just stop there, I really want to just throw it out there that a lot of times when we're talking to research and innovation, we talk a lot to the technology aspects. But I think now if you're looking at it from the systemic and also focusing on people, you have to understand that there's a whole value chain here. And that value chain is around infrastructure. There's also social and behavioral. So citizens have to participate in all this. You also have the policymakers themselves. Are they on board? Do they understand what their contribution in terms of the policy that can enable or create a conducive environment? And we cannot ignore the fact that has to be sustainable finance.
Okay.
And this is where it's very important also to realize that research funding is really an enabler or a seed investment, but there has to be somebody coming on board to actually say, looking at what you've invested so far, how can take this up so that your pilot can actually scale now to industrial application?
I think for funding, because that kind of leads to the next question I'm going to ask Edu. And I think in your outlay, that's actually very, very powerful, because what you're saying basically is the fact that you've got a stakeholder mapping. So which partners do you have in your outlay with respect to what you do? And I think the idea is understanding your strengths and your weakness and their strengths and weakness. And how can you almost map what you need from what you have, and also who has what you need so you can get what you want. It's almost like that mapping process, you are able to leverage on partnerships for sustainability. Now you mentioned funding. And everybody understands for an entrepreneur, funding is almost non-negotiable. And so that kind of leads me to the next question. But because I'm aware that the focus of the webinar is around research and academics. And so I want to ask Edu, if I may. Edu, so Edu, in your view, and I'm saying this because I know you've gone through a process of making this happen. What are the key considerations to mobilizing resources to implement a research project or program? Edu, please.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Akan. So before I go into answering that question, please let me just acknowledge the training I received at Lancaster University, as part of my Commonwealth Fellowship. I worked with Ruth team, and it was really, really incredible. And I can directly link my success to the training I received. So I must just acknowledge that. Thank you so much. Lancaster University, thank you, Ruth, and all the knowledge exchange team. So back to the question. Yes, so I'll be answering really from practical point of view, because in the past 5 years, I have been mobilizing funding for a research infrastructure project in my university. And so what the key considerations for me, because these are questions that funders or investors ask you. The first thing they want to see, they're going to be asking you, what's your scope? Because nobody is going to be interested in if you are just presenting a big elephant project. So when you're looking at your scope, you have to think about, is it smart? And by smart, I mean, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Does it have any timeline or time frame? Because people are not just going to be funding anything that is doesn't come to it's just unlimited,
Okay.
And then the other thing they're going to be asking you is that how are you leveraging with what is available? What is available? How do you leverage, whether you're looking at your research infrastructure, whether it's an ICT, whether it's equipment, how do you leverage that with what is available? And then the last point, I also want to raise is that you also have to consider what sources of mobilization are you looking at? Are you thinking about domestic, which has to be in-country funding? And because it will have a different terms and conditions, or are you looking at external funding? That means international funding. And so my recommendation in all of this is that people always ask you, what do you have? So it's good to start from domestic, start first with your mobilizing domestic resources, and then use that to move towards seeking mobilizing international funding. Yes, I quite agree with the United Nations Agenda and Action Agenda 2015 that underpins the importance of international funding in Africa's developmental process. Okay. So for me, yes, you have to pursue both. You have to look for both domestic and international funding to succeed.
That's very, very interesting, Edu. And I think just listening to you, you must talk about considerations around scope. The idea of your project, is it measurable? Is it achievable? I mean, do you have a time frame? Also, can you leverage on both, if it's like a national funding, local funding, and international funding? And to be fair, you can't really connect with international funding if you're only local. That means you almost have to be international to have some connectivity with international funding. I guess, so that kind of builds a scope of the considerations to be to mobilize resource. But I think for me, a good point you raise, which I want to kind of lead to the next question is, what do you have now? If you're going to meet somebody and you want them to give you money, they want to ask you, well, right now, what do you have? It almost separates, if you like, physical capital and a term known as social capital. Now, interestingly, we have an expert in the room who is actually a professor of social entrepreneurship. And so, Sarah, please, would you kind of give kind of an overview of what the concept of social capital is and why it's crucial to an entrepreneur, but also why is it very important? And what is it?
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this today. So I'm kind of going to pick up on Andy's points, but also some things that Joanne and Akan and also Yame's contribution touched on as well. And it's this aspect of social capital. And social capital is really about the process of creating a condition for the effective exchange of information and resources. And I think that's a critical thing, is this exchange process. So it can only really exist between people. So it's built and developed through relational aspects like trusting in the other, knowledge about the other, respect for another, liking, which you also talked about earlier on, and so on. So what social capital brings for an entrepreneur can be invaluable. There's things like knowledge, information, and the bonds which really define a relationship can help make the difference between success and failure. So really social capital is a relational relationship which we can only observe as one or other of its kind of manifestations, so how it's produced and how it kind of goes forward. So I always think of social capital as being like a bridge building process. It's linking individuals, so that networks are a series of bridges that link numerous individuals. But the important thing to really kind of bear in mind is that it means so much more than simply the exchange of a business card or the meeting of two people. And I think this is where policymakers especially have kind of fallen down. Their so-called kind of networking events have tended to miss the point about the collaboration and the building of a relationship. So for social capital to form, people need to be brought together to find and work out if that kind of commonality exists, which can help them to build and develop social capital for entrepreneurial endeavours. But this can often only happen by chance. You know, people need to click. They need to get on with each other and find the thing that they can bond through. And in many ways, this is what RECIRCULATE is offering and is doing. It's bringing people together and providing them with the opportunity to find the click, to find the commonality. And in thinking it through and visualizing, if you think about networks as being a series of bridges that link, bond, and unite numerous individuals, it's the networks that offer the structure for social capital. But the process of social capital is the constructing of the bridges. So it's what's going back and forth across the bridge, above and below the bridge. So a robust relationship or robust social capital bridge will allow better access to a richer range of information and resources. So it's the relational aspect and the bonding which is really kind of key for social capital. But bear in mind that the production of social capital represents a useful investment, because social capital can endure for life, hence it being called a capital. Now, in many ways, this is also what Lancaster University is known for through its KE activity, supporting and providing the space for individuals to do this, to come together and collaborate. And this is what Ruth as well was touching on, and so was Andy.
That's fantastic. So just listening to you, Sarah, I think that's quite phenomenal. As you were talking, something just hit me I've never thought about until now. And maybe I'm wrong, you can correct me. It almost feels to me like a researcher maybe struggles with being seen as a business or an entrepreneur from a point of business entrepreneurship. But because inherently research, in some sense, it's for the communities, for society, I'm almost wondering in my mind that does it mean that it might be easier actually if every researcher sees themselves as a social entrepreneur in some context, then it makes it easier in that sense. So that means you appreciate what social capital is and its importance in making those changes you require. So it feels to me that if you don't consider yourself as an entrepreneur because you're a researcher, consider yourself as a social entrepreneur, because by default almost is what you are. I'm going to go back to Joanne again, because in your first response, you kind of give a sense of what entrepreneurial thinking is for researchers and why it's important. So now in my head, I'm struggling. So, okay, now, how is that different for a research person and a business person? Or how is it similar? Could you clarify, please?
Thanks, I can. I'm going to say that it's similar. I thought about this, and I think it's very similar. And I think it's exactly what you say about social capital, in that, you know, researchers need to kind of think in similar ways to business people, because I think to make a difference in the world, we've got to support livelihoods and support people making a living. And I think as researchers, we've got to understand that, because, you know, in order to make change, you know, we've got to support people's livelihoods. And maybe there's that real connection between what we do in research to what we do in business. So when we're thinking entrepreneurially, as researchers, we need to think about, you know, not just relying on funding all the time. And it goes back to Kirk's original talk, just about that centre thing, is about the entrepreneurship at the centre of this, in order to keep this going and to keep change happening in the world. So maybe more business owners need to have that sense of understanding of the social impact of maybe that's a real connection here. So I'm going to throw out and say it's the same.
It's the same.
Identify opportunities and working
pick
together.
up on that point as well, because I think...
Yes, please, Sarah, go on, yes, go on.
You know, because with social entrepreneurship, in my view anyway, it's not an economic process, but it's an economic process, but it's dealing with social outcomes rather than purely economic outcomes.
I see.
Outcomes are very much about the good of society and designed to make the world a better place, build their lives, and especially those individuals who are more vulnerable. So I don't think social entrepreneurs, and I think this is where it's meeting you and Joanne as well, don't measure their success just by profit. It's about what they have done to change the world, which is important to the social entrepreneur. And it's this social change that really matters. So I suppose at a very basic level, social entrepreneurship is about doing entrepreneurship, but for the social good and to support a social cause, which is maybe where we probably kick in as well. So it's about bringing social change that really matters.
That's why I was saying, Sarah, that it feels to me like every researcher, in fact, basically almost write like a little note on your wall in the office. You see every time you come into the office, I am a social entrepreneur. That will change perspective, because it's actually who you are. And then it reduces that, if you like, burden of thinking yourself as a business person for profits, which actually what the issue and the disconnect is. Now, Yame, you spoke about connections. I guess my follow-up question would be, I am very sure it must be difficult in some sense, having those partnerships. I guess my question is, what makes developing partnerships particularly difficult between academics and entrepreneurs, in your view?
In my view, specifically, I think we haven't yet made that transition.
Okay.
What I mean by having made that transition, I'm talking to, it's something we talked about these high gates. Universities or research institutions here are still caught up in a lot of the things that have been spoken to earlier about how to communicate to their research outcomes. So they're still seen as knowledge centers where people come to learn, where people have to then earn the right to graduate towards a higher status, whether it's a master's student, postgrad and all that. Also, I think it's the issue around publishing as well. There's this huge focus on publishing. Because we are coming from the outside, specifically as a micro, small, medium enterprise, you don't really have that respect. I must use that word here. You don't have that respect or that you've done anything of significance, and somehow your understanding or your knowledge is somehow of an inferior nature simply because of the size of who you are. As an entrepreneur, as a small business, you're small in relation to the university, so it's a power issue as well there. So then it comes now finally to this issue of the thinking. So because the thinking itself also hasn't translated, it's now causing a barrier as to now how do you work together, because you're not coming from the same outlook per se. So I think I wouldn't want to talk too much about the challenges because I think that's already been covered. But for the most part, I think what I've tried to do is always to start from looking at it from the perspective of addressing, if I'm going to come in there into the institution and somehow start to create that space for mutual benefit, or start to create the change of the mindset of how there could be opportunities here for a partnership, I really focused on two things. Those two things are, one, being very clear on my message, what it is that I'm doing. I'm dealing with the integrated holistic frameworks for urban development and how to actually now use those to actually now focus on, I think, a few of the things that have been touched on. How to promote that people, prosperity, and planet. This is that people are at the heart of this. There must be equity for people. Prosperity must be inclusive, and I think moving forward, there must be that focus on resiliency and sustainability. So because of that focus, this is my clear message. People, because I keep saying it over and over and over and over again, now people start wondering as they experience other things in relation to what I'm saying. They start saying, aha, that's what he's talking about. But the second thing is also when you're dealing with universities, you find, especially African ones, especially in Botswana, I find that as an SME, focus on the inefficiency. And I think this is very important for any micro, small, medium enterprise. Focus on the inefficiency within the university itself. They have their focus areas and what they're trying to do, but also more importantly, you yourself, where is the gap that they're actually experiencing, and where is that? I think I talked about strengths earlier. Where's that strength that you're bringing that can actually now, they can see, oh, you know what, because of the message that this man is bringing, I think we can just slot him right here. And once you're in, I think that's when you see a lot of times they start now introducing you to others. Start introducing you to others within their ecosystem. And again, this brings you back to the point that you have to keep harking on about the very same thing. It sounds like you become a broken record talking about the exact same thing over and over again. But the point is that the more you stay on message, the clearer your people can receive your message. Yeah.
Sarah, so my follow-up question to you actually has been answered, because I think yourself and John I heard that there's really no difference between, if you like, social entrepreneurship and traditional businesses from a point of impact and being able to solve a challenge or provide a social good. But you raised a point in your last question I want to kind of relate to. And you said currently social capital seems to be by chance. In your view, do you think it should be a bit more intentional? So my point is, just the way an entrepreneur goes out to find physical capital, should it also be the case where you are developing your social capital, but intentionally and strategically? What do you think, Sarah?
I think there is an element to it of that, but I think people have to be very careful, because if you're seen to be kind of forcing yourself or, trying to grab all this social capital, then it kind of puts people off, really, I think. And certainly from when I've watched it before, kind of unfold, that's what we've found. We have, however, in previous research projects, put people together in a room just to see what's happened, and we have noticed that people have found commonalities and gone forward from there. But I know myself from my own experience and research projects that we've looked at, maybe it's different in different cultures, but certainly if you're seen to kind of be forcing the building of social capital and the forcing of the network, the forcing of the link, it doesn't work in the same way. Okay, so let me ask you just as a follow-up, because I'm trying to raise a point. So now, without seeming like supporting people being lazy, and this is very important, there is an element of the fact that it should happen organically. But I also believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I also believe that if you don't put yourself in the right environment for the organic, if you like, integration that builds capital to happen, you can sit down in your house and just say, well, it should happen by chance. And I think it will never happen. So some of that balance between, what do you think? I think that's what RECIRCULATE is offering, isn't it? It's that space for collaboration as well. And, you know, we've done various projects over the year, and people have been talking about impact. So we've done various projects, and if I take just the management school on its own, and I know that these happen across the university, we've done things like lead, ideas, wave to growth programs, which have all been funded projects. And many of these projects have offered good example of impact cases, where we can demonstrate the impact, which comes back to the social change as well, I suppose, as well as the economic exchange, where that has actually gone forward. So I think you are right. I think you have to put yourself in certain situations.
Environments.
It can be. But I do find that if it is that kind of forcing, it does put people off.
Okay, so just a follow-up to that, Edu, I'm going to ask you your last question here before we wrap up this second panel. So you spoke about that, the considerations for resource mobilization. And I guess for me, many researchers, academics in Africa and probably even around the world always struggle with funding research and the success of research funding. And I think in my mind, if I asked you and said, what is the biggest challenge to research funding success? And how do you mitigate it? How might you respond? Edu, please.
Yes, so thank you, Akan. Yeah, so just talk about, I have 2 points to talk about on that issue. And the first point I want to raise, first of all, is like, I want to talk about the general apathy among we researchers, because I mean, when you need to apply, so there's a process. You need to look for grants, you need to search for this funding, and this funding doesn't just drop, there's a process. And so there's a general apathy, because why? Because people are struggling. I mean, the funding and the research and funding applications are complicated, you know, they are time consuming, you know, and maybe at times you don't even really have the experts. So for me, in mitigating that, which again is one of the learning points I took back at Lancaster University, and which is what RECIRCULATE is doing, training and capacity building. We don't need the researcher to complete all the sections in a research funding application. I mean, this is what is happening in Africa, and we need to start changing that attitude. In our research ecosystems in our institutions, we should be able to have finance experts, you know, so that the professor, the researcher can just think about the technical aspects and allow the experts in finance, in accounting, to take care of the budgeting aspects. And in that way, you will enhance success. But if you are expecting the professor, well, researchers are not good in finance matters. So if you are still operating that system, then you are not going to be very successful. So we need to change. And that can only happen through communication, through engagement, through training. And then the other thing is that there's also, this one I'm also talking from my experience and being the research and innovation and director in my university. For the past 5 years, we have been trying big grants. We end up putting good proposals. We end up in the last rounds, but when it comes to on-site visitation, when it has to do with actually looking at infrastructure, we have challenges there. And so that was why we got so frustrated with this. That was why myself and my colleagues said, well, we are not going to be having this. It's better, let us think about how we can mitigate this. And that was how the whole idea to start this mobilizing funding for research building infrastructure came about. So for me, we need training, which is what RECIRCULATE is doing. And for me, I think I'm only thinking differently because of the training I have received. And that's what I must every time acknowledge that, because most of the time I don't even blame people for just feeling, because I mean, when you just look at the procedure of looking for funding, it's discouraging. So you need to be trained. If you are not trained, then you don't even go looking for it. And in that case, you don't even get it. So thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. And as you were just saying that, I can see people are just hailing Edu in the group because they can associate it with that feeling. I mean, Kirk is on the call. Can you imagine Professor Kirk's simple? That dude is a director of the center, director of RECIRCULATE, director of Actuate, director. My goodness, his directorship is endless. Now you want him to be the one doing the budget of a proposal. You want to kill him? So it almost feels like even the allocation of roles within that ecosystem increases the success rate of applications. So who does what? Make life easy. And then for me, from my experience, another question I always ask people is this. How can you be looking for money and not know who gives money? How does that even make common sense? I want to first know, in my field of area, who gives money, big money, middle money, small money. And that's true. On my laptop, I have an Excel spreadsheet of about 200 organizations who give funding, small funding. I know when they give funding, why they give funding, who they give funding to, because you need to know how do you put yourself in a position of being able to even apply for funding if you don't know this. Now, I think we've gone through a series of questions and it's been absolutely fantastic from my view so far. I want to refer to a few feedback on the chat section, which is very important. So Nicholas Drager says, when you're talking about social entrepreneurship and the connections and value to business, you need to define what profit or rather value creation is and consider, if you like, the timelines of the project or investment and that process. You also need to define the fundamental value of the person or the people involved. So it's almost emphasizing that the similarity between social entrepreneurship and traditional entrepreneurship, because it is still the same, only the value systems might be different, but that has to be defined. There are two questions I want to ask the panelists before we wrap up that's come through the chat. And the first one is, it's from Feli. So Feli is saying, what impacts are we interested in as researchers? Okay, is it general impact factors or impact of the usefulness of knowledge in communities? Anybody on the panel can respond to that. What impact should one be interested in? Or is it a combination of both? What do you think?
If it's impact in a kind of impact sense, I think it's about using your research to demonstrate or to build a change in practice. And I think it's how you follow that change in practice, which is the important and interesting thing.
Okay, that makes sense. Anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah, so for me,
I can.
yes. Okay.
Go on, Edu. Go on, Edu.
Yes, so I think both, but I mean, if we look at our situation in Africa now, we're looking at a generation, we're having unemployment rate that is increasing, especially for young people. We are looking at challenges with all kinds of things, water quality, air quality, and all of that. So I think we should start thinking more of us looking at community impact, social impact that Sarah talked about. Yeah. Okay. So this is for me, because of where we are now in Africa, we need to refocus into community and social impact as opposed to the impact factor thing.
That's good.
Yeah.
So yes, go on, please. Yes, I can hear you. That's Sam.
Yeah. So Edu just, said what I was just going to say. So you look at impact that solves problems in the community and not just general impact. You want to look at impact that solves community problems. So the focus should be on both, but solving problems in the community is what research impact should focus on.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to open this up just for the next 5 minutes, just to any comments in the room or any questions or feedback in the room, very short. So anybody who has any comment in the room, I'm going to open it up very briefly before we do a final wrap up. Anybody, please. Or if there is nobody, I'll be happy to call some names who I can see already in the room. Anybody?
Yes, me.
Yes, go on, Noella. Yes, please.
Sorry, it's a very long question.
Oh,
so, but I just had to take it. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon now. Thank you very much. It's been amazing. So following my time at Lancaster, I have spent 1 year trying to convince my company as to, the importance of, some of the things that I took out of my fellowship. And I finally received a mandate that said to take research and commercialize it with a focus on waste to energy, which is bioenergy. Of course, there are other areas. There are two other areas we're looking at, which is solar energy and some other, another area is like electrical energy and all of that. But yeah, but my focus is on waste to energy through bioenergy with a focus on social impact and profits. Okay. And how will the company make money? So yes, thank you to Lancaster University for the opportunity. And yeah, it's been a long time coming, but finally I got there with my organization. So my question is this: one of the things that struck me in some of the discussions was the assumption that people should be able to just go out, read, research, come back with solutions that we can take to market.
Okay.
You know, there was no thinking, there was no thought process around how do you research, how do you bring in researchers, how do you even look at research that has already been done and bring them into the mix, which is where projects like RECIRCULATE, Actuate, born from research, can showcase to the industries. So bringing it back to why we are here, one of the key aspects of RECIRCULATE or Actuate for me is the energy dimension, which is water for energy and water for food, which again are the biggest drivers of the impact that RECIRCULATE will have in Africa.
Interesting.
So the question for
Are we going
Andy,
to have a question, Noella, at some point?
yes, the question now. So I just wanted to give that preamble. So the question for Andy, Ruth, and Professor Keck is this: how do you see RECIRCULATE / Actuate developing each of the work packages from knowledge / research in the countries of focus to application, which is technology, and business, that is market and commercialization, through partnerships with these industries that drive the economies, noting that these industries have influence even on the government?
Okay, that's a very straightforward question. I think actually I would like Keck. Is Keck still on the call?
I'm still here.
Please, Bros, can you respond to that? So, no, I'm sure you heard the question.
Yeah.
There's one more question, sorry.
No, Noella, I'm sorry. Let's respond to one because of time, please.
Okay,
go on,
that's
Keck.
fine.
Thank you.
So I think it's important to recognize, you mentioned the individual work packages, and one of the things that we're working on really hard here is how we bring the science and the technology that's been developed in the work packages together, so that they're considered as a whole rather than as sort of siloed entities, because they are all interrelated. And I think by doing that, you actually add value to what is happening within the research project. And perhaps for me, I mean, I'm not an expert in entrepreneurial thinking or knowledge exchange by any stretch of the imagination. But to me, it seems that, if you're able to show that, that value in a holistic way, that could be and perhaps should be much more impactful when it comes to engaging with the private sector or, people who are interested in developing this in a business setting. And I think there are also, just before I let other people in who know more about this than I, there are also issues of scale as well, where, it could be that this is driven forward very, very successfully by quite a small company. It might be, a 2 or a 3 person company, as much as by a huge, multinational company. So I think, that scale is also something that's important. And of course, ultimately, what is the intended use? What is the intended situation? We all get hung up, I suppose, about the issue of, it must be enormous, for it to be effective and important. Well, I actually don't subscribe to that at all.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. So I know somebody is asked in the group. I think anybody, both from the first panel can respond to this. And the question really is, I think the question is, how do you make funders trust you in the first place? There has to be a beginning point. And the question is, how do you make funders trust you? Anybody can respond to that. I think it's a very good question, because people are worried or scared to even start. Anybody?
Nick.
Yes, Nick, go on, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking as a ex-investment fund manager, the way you create that sense of trust is that you come up with, you develop your product, your model very well. You look at the long-term value of your model. So it's not just a case of I'm sticking my hand out for largesse from the investor, but I have a real value creation proposal here. So you've got to design your model and understand how your project works and how it creates the value. And if you show that you've really done that thinking, the real in-depth thinking, that will help to go a long way to creating trust with the investor.
That's fantastic, Nick. I think as well, on top of that is the fact that if, for example, you're beginning, and I know for early researchers who are just starting, I think the worry is, well, I think most funders, I think Nick, you probably agree with me on this, like the evidence of track record. And so if a newbie doesn't have a track record, in my view, then find somebody who has a track record and partner with them. Most African people who apply for grants, in some sense, in my experience, just want to go alone. It's always solo. But the point is, the world has moved on. You can't do things on your own, which is why we focus on engagement as the first panel session today, on how can you leverage on other people to increase your own capacity for sustainability.
Yeah, but I'll make one other comment following on from that is, for God's sake, if you're a young entrepreneur, don't think that you have to automatically go out and find, and I'm speaking as an old fart, as you can see in my picture, I've got the gray hair. Do not think that you have to go out and find some old fart to partner with because you think that they might have the sort of credibility factor.
Yeah, okay.
If you can partner and look for advice and have them on as an advisor and so on. You don't have to take them on full time. And be very careful, because a lot of us old farts are stuck in our ways. We have a lot of assumed realities and beliefs. And as a young entrepreneur, you've got to keep that free-flowing spirit to a certain extent. Please do that.
Thank you very much. That's really, really helpful, Nick. So now I think we've come to the end of the session today. But before we leave, there is a short video I'd like everybody to watch. I think that video, in my mind, has been produced by Lancaster University in partnership with our African partners. So that video has been co-developed and co-produced. And it's a good representation of most of what we've spoken about today: partnerships, collaboration, engagement, entrepreneurship, social good, social capital, innovation, creativity. Almost encapsulates, if like, everything we've done today, and why the RECIRCULATE project, in partnership with different partners in Africa, and why it works, and the reason why is that premise is around capacity building and development. And so before I do that, I'd like us to appreciate the second panelist that's who've done, I think for me, they've done an incredible job. Joanne, thank you very much. Yame, Sarah, and Ed, you guys have been absolutely fantastic. And so on that note, can I call on the team to play the short video? Is generated in Africa per year and is estimated to reach 160 million tons within 5 years. Over 600 million Africans don't have access to electricity. Over 200 million people experience hunger and are chronically undernourished. Over 100 people die every hour, and over 100,000 children die every year due to poor water. In an era where global concerns about sustainability are peaking, a global sustainability network has never been so crucial. Sustainable development in Africa is seeing a range of challenges which impacts the environment, economic prosperity, the health and well-being of Africans. These challenges, however, provide huge opportunities to facilitate the co-design, co-development and co-delivery of sustainable initiatives and solutions which directly address the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These can be achieved through collaboration, the development of strategic partnerships, and growing a global network. The Center for Global Innovation, based at Lancaster University, is at the heart of this expanding network to focus on real transformational change.
Eco-innovation needs to be community-driven if we're to develop inclusive solutions where people and planet prosper. Collaboration is the guiding principle for us at the Centre for Global Eco-Innovation. Connection drives innovation, and forging links between industry, government, citizens and researcher is absolutely central to what we do at the Centre. Only by working together in equitable partnerships can we break down the barriers to building a better future.
Universities across Africa, working with businesses, will be key drivers of eco-innovation. This is why the Center for Global Eco-Innovation was established at the University of Benin in partnership with Lancaster University. Since then, we have focused the conversion of waste to energy through a £7 million RECIRCULATE and £800,000 actually translation project funded by the UK government's Global Challenge Research Fund.
1.3 billion people live in Africa. This will nearly double by 2050. There's a lot of math to feed. If we already struggle with food insecurity, it means that we need community-based innovation and collaborative research that addresses our food challenges in practical ways. This is our mandate at the Africa Innovation Institute. However, to ensure progressive outcomes, the role of government cannot be overemphasized.
Government can implement policies that limit the causes of climate change, but we need the right strategies to support those causes. That means new. Causes of climate change, but we need the right strategies to support those causes. That means new.
Ooh. Oh God.
Okay.
I'm sorry about this, guy.
No, don't worry about it. I think it's the internet is the network is a bit poor today. So
no, I apologize.
So what we'll do is we have the email addresses of everybody who has participated. So we're going to send the link of the video to everybody once it's ready, so you can have a sense of what I'm speaking about. But I think we can actually proceed to wrapping up the day. I'm going to call back Professor Keksempo to give us closing remarks so we can wrap it up. We do apologize for the video malfunction, but I'm sure we can get it right some other time.
Well,
back to you, Kek.
Thank you. In some ways, I'm relieved because then we actually missed my moment in camera.
Yes, Kek was supposed to be on the video afterwards.
Yeah, I'm so pleased it failed. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think for me this webinar has been extremely illuminating. I think you know, the positivity and the ideas are flowing from the, you know, the RECIRCULATE family, and I think for me, this is one of the things that keeps me awake at night is how we take this beyond, you know, the research envelope and working to develop this in a real sense. And I think with the team that we've got and the people that we're engaging with, some of whom have spoken and also who have attended, I'm very, very optimistic that we can actually do something that's truly meaningful and has real legacy, in fact, beyond you know, the funding for this project. So I'd just like to finish by thanking, of course, yourself, Akan, as always, as the pilot, but also all the contributors from across the African continent and, of course, here at Lancaster as well. And I very much look forward to the continuing events under this month's activities and then into the next set of, you know, thematic webinars as well. So thank you all. It's been wonderful. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Kek. Absolutely appreciate it. I think I want to also just acknowledge a few very powerful partners in the room. We think thanks to Cynthia, I can see you. Thanks for your participation. I know you're a really, really busy woman, so thanks for being able to participate today. Thanks, Professor Lawrence Zamoye. Thanks to Abigail Tembo. Thanks to Anthony from Ghana. Thanks to Bokan Intengi from Botswana. Thanks to everybody for being patient with us. And I hope the conversations were enlightening and insightful. So now, as for information raising, we will be having the next session on the 8th of October. Don't want to miss it. That will be power-packed. As a matter of fact, we are focusing on a simple question: can Africa feed itself? Everybody's become a farmer. Even me, I've become a farmer. I didn't believe that I would become a farmer, but farming and agriculture is the way to go. And so that next webinar we're focusing on addressing that big question: that can Africa feed itself? All through this month, September, and in October, there is a series of activities on the Participating RECIRCULATE program, which everybody will be kept abreast of, so you can actually participate and engage as you progress. On that note, thank you very much. I want to make a quick request. Can we all unmute ourselves. The last time I didn't hear the clap. I really want to hear the clap now. Everybody unmute yourself.
Okay, you're not clapping.
Yeah,
I can't hear your clap.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.